26 hours before my brother's engagement party, my father looked me in the eye and said, "You're not coming. I'm not humiliating this family by explaining you to people who actually accomplish something." 3 days later, my brother walked into my headquarters, saw me standing near the conference room, and laughed like God had handed him a private joke. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Did you hear Caldwell Pierce was coming in and apply for a receptionist job?" I didn't react. I didn't give him the satisfaction. His fiancée froze so fast it was almost violent. "Ryan," she said, her voice dropping. "Stop." But he was already leaning across the walnut table, expensive watch flashing under the lights, smiling that same polished, superior smile he'd worn at family dinners for years. Then I pulled out the chair at the head of the table. The one with Ethan Mercer, CEO, engraved on the brass plate he hadn't bothered to read, and I sat down. Less than a day earlier, my father had called me a disappointment to my face and erased me from my own brother's big night. Now, Ryan was standing in my building, in my boardroom, in the company I'd bled to build from nothing, and he had no idea the next 45 minutes were about to destroy the version of himself our family had spent a lifetime worshipping. Before the glass walls, the leadership team, and the numbers that finally made people listen, I was just the younger Mercer brother, the one who walked away from a stable career to chase something no one in my family believed in. Ryan was 6 years ahead of me and had never missed a step. Finance degree, fast-track promotions, the kind of resume that reads like a checklist of everything our father respected. By 35, he was already managing major accounts at Caldwell Pierce, shaking hands with people who decided where money moved and who mattered. I had a different resume. At 28, I left a solid operations role at Stonebrook Freight, a job with benefits, predictability, and a future my parents could understand. I traded it for a half-built idea, 2 co-founders, and a spreadsheet that barely held together under real-world pressure. My father called it reckless. My mother called it a phase. Neither of them said it with anger. That was the part that stuck. It wasn't a fight, it was a quiet, settled certainty that I was going to fail. Noah and Jason, my co-founders, had worked with me at Stonebrook. We spent over a year building a logistics optimization platform after hours, running on bad coffee and worse sleep, convincing ourselves we were building something that mattered. By the time we quit and went all in, we weren't brave, we were committed enough that turning back felt worse than failing. The first year proved my family right. The product broke under real usage, clients dropped off, our seed money evaporated faster than we could justify it. I maxed out 2 credit cards just to keep basic operations running. And there were nights I sat alone in that rented office space, staring at lines of code and projections that refused to make sense. That was when it got dangerous. Not the debt, not the stress, the voice in my head that sounded exactly like my father. I didn't collapse. I didn't have the luxury. I took on contract work unremarkable, grinding projects, fixing warehouse systems for companies that didn't care who I was as long as I delivered. It kept the lights on while we rebuilt everything from the ground up. Jason rewrote the core platform. Noah handled whatever we could still call growth. And I learned how to survive long enough for something to finally work. By the second year, it did. We landed our first real client. Then another. Then a funding round that bought us time instead of pressure. What started as a failing idea turned into something real, something scalable, something people were willing to bet on. I never told my family, not because I was hiding it, because they never asked. Every holiday, every dinner, every forced gathering followed the same script. Ryan talked about deals, bonuses, vacations. My parents leaned in, proud, engaged, alive in a way they never were with me. Then, someone, usually my mother, would glance my way and ask, "And how are things going?" Not curiosity, containment, so I'd say, "Good, busy," and they'd nod, relieved, and move on. By the time Ryan got engaged, I had a company with dozens of employees, a full executive team, and revenue numbers that would have changed every conversation we'd ever had. But to them, I was still the son who walked away from something real, still the one who hadn't made it, still the one they didn't need to take seriously. And that illusion was about to cost them more than they understood. By the time I was in my early 30s, I could predict every family gathering down to the exact tone of voice my mother would use when she spoke to me. It didn't matter if it was Thanksgiving, Christmas, or some random Sunday dinner. The script never changed. Ryan would take the floor without trying. He didn't have to. Conversations naturally bent toward him, his deals, his clients, the firm, the bonuses, the places he'd flown to for work that sounded like vacations to everyone else. My father would ask follow-up questions like he was conducting an interview for a magazine feature. My mother would smile in that quiet, satisfied way, like everything had turned out exactly the way she'd hoped. I'd sit there, listening, eating, waiting for my turn that never really came. When it did, it was always the same. A quick glance, a polite pause, and you? My mother would ask, her voice soft, careful. How are things going? Not curiosity. Containment. There was always an unspoken rule underneath it. Don't say anything that forces us to take you seriously. Don't say anything that disrupts the version of reality we're comfortable with. So I learned to keep it short. Busy. Work's good. That was enough. It always was. They didn't ask what I was building. They didn't ask how many clients we had, how much we were growing, how close we'd come to shutting down, or how far we'd pushed past it. They didn't ask about the nights I'd slept in the office, or the months I'd gone without paying myself so the team could stay afloat. To them, none of that counted, because none of it fit the narrative they'd already decided on. I wasn't the one who succeeded. Ryan was, and once a family decides who you are, they stop updating the file. There were moments when I almost said something, when I almost pushed back, forced the conversation into the open, made them look at me and actually see what I'd built, but every time, I stopped. Because I could already hear the response, polite, dismissive, slightly confused, like I was exaggerating, like I didn't fully understand my own situation, like I needed to grow up. So I let them have their version of me, the unfinished one, the temporary one, the one still figuring things out. And the longer I let it sit, the more permanent it became. By the time Ryan's engagement was announced, the roles in our family weren't just assumed, they were fixed. He was the success story. I was the cautionary tale, and no one, not my father, not my mother, not even Ryan, had any idea how wrong they were. The Thursday before Ryan's engagement party, I drove out to my parents' house in Maplewood, with a gift sitting in the passenger seat. It was something my mother had mentioned months earlier in passing, a high-end Dutch oven she'd seen online, but wouldn't buy for herself. I ordered it, had it wrapped, then unwrapped it, and did it again because it didn't feel right the first time. I don't know why I still tried. I found my father in the kitchen, same place he always was when he had something to say. Coffee mug in hand, posture straight, expression already set. He didn't waste time. We need to talk about tomorrow. I held the box against my side. What time do you want me there? I can come early. Help set things up. You're not coming. He said it flat, no hesitation, no build-up. For a second, I thought I misheard him. What? He set his mug down on the counter with controlled precision. We're not introducing you to that room. The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces. That room, I asked. Ryan's fiancée's family will be there. People from Caldwell Pierce. People who've built something of themselves. His eyes stayed on mine. I'm not explaining you. The kitchen went quiet. My mother was at the table, folding napkins into perfect triangles like she was preparing for something delicate. She didn't look up. I waited. Not for him to take it back, I knew better, but for her to soften it, translate it into something less sharp, something survivable. It never came. Dad, I said, keeping my voice level. You're telling me I'm not allowed at my own brother's engagement party. I'm telling you tomorrow isn't about you. Ryan stepped into the doorway like he'd been listening the whole time. Dad's right, he said. Arms folded. Casual. Like this was obvious. It's supposed to be a clean night. No awkward conversations. I looked at him. Awkward for who? He shrugged. You tell me. What do you even say when people ask what you do? There it was. Not confusion. Not concern. Just dismissal. I turned to my mother. Are you seriously okay with this? She smoothed another napkin. Aligning the edges like that mattered more than the conversation happening 5 feet away. It's just one evening, she said quietly. Don't make it bigger than it is. One evening. Like being removed from your own family could be scheduled and minimized. I set the gift down on the counter. It made a dull, heavy sound when it hit the granite. No one looked at it. So let me get this straight, I said. I'm good enough when you need help setting up your Wi-Fi, or moving furniture, or fixing whatever's broken. But when it actually matters, when you want to look like a perfect family, I don't exist. My father's jaw tightened. Don't turn this into something it's not. Something inside me shifted, not cracked, settled. Like a decision that had been waiting for years finally found its place. You already did, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just walked past them and went upstairs. My old room looked exactly the same. Same walls, same furniture, same framed certificates hanging like proof of something that had never been enough. I opened the closet and pulled out the suit I'd bought for the party. Dark navy, clean lines. Expensive enough that I'd thought twice before buying it. I'd pictured wearing it, standing next to my brother, Looking like I belonged there, I folded it carefully and put it back in the box. Then, I set it on the top shelf. Out of reach. For a minute, I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Downstairs, I could hear laughter. My mother. Ryan. Normal. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been erased. My phone buzzed. A message from Megan. Reminder 9:30 a.m. Monday. Final partnership review with Caldwell Pierce. Full team attending. I read it twice. Caldwell Pierce. Ryan's firm. I exhaled slowly. The kind of breath you take when something clicks into place whether you want it to or not. Downstairs, no one came up, no one knocked. I left through the back door without saying goodbye. Friday morning. While my family was getting ready for a celebration, I wasn't allowed to attend. I was already in my office reviewing projections with Vanessa. Numbers, contracts, strategy. Things that made sense. At noon, while they were raising glasses, I approved a $250,000 expansion budget. At 2, I was on the phone with Caleb going over the final terms of the Caldwell deal. The numbers are solid, he said. But there are some internal culture flags, a few managers with questionable behavior. What kind of behavior? Entitlement, arrogance, treating people like they don't matter. I almost laughed. That night, my phone lit up with a photo in the family group chat. Ryan, his fiancée, my parents, her family. All of them standing in the backyard I grew up in. Smiling like everything was exactly how it should be. I wasn't in it. Not in the frame. Not in the caption. I stared at it for a second, then took a screenshot, not out of anger, out of clarity. Then, I put my phone face down and went back to work. Monday morning was coming, and none of them had any idea what room they were about to walk into. I didn't go home that night. After leaving my parents' house, I drove straight back into the city. The roads mostly empty. The silence in the car louder than anything that had been said in that kitchen. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. By the time I reached my apartment, it was late enough that the city had that hollow. In between, feeling like everything was paused, waiting for the next day to start, I hung my jacket by the door and stood there for a moment. Not moving. There was a version of me, an older one, that would have replayed the conversation over and over, picking it apart, wondering what I could have said differently. Trying to find a version of it where things didn't end the way they always did. That version was gone. I poured myself a drink, something strong enough to cut through the noise in my head, and walked over to the window. The skyline stretched out in front of me. Indifferent. Steady. It didn't care who my family thought I was. That was the first clean thought I'd had all day. I set the glass down and walked into my bedroom. The suit box was still sitting in the back seat of my car. But I could see it in my head, perfect. Untouched. Unnecessary. I didn't need it, not for them. I pulled out my laptop instead and opened the Monday agenda Megan had sent earlier. Caldwell Pierce. Final partnership review. Full leadership present. Ryan. I stared at his name longer than I should have, not because I was nervous, because I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. I'd spent too long trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Meanwhile, I'd built my own. The realization didn't come with anger. It didn't come with relief. It came with something quieter, final. My phone buzzed again, another notification from the family group chat. More photos, more smiles, more proof that they could rewrite reality as long as it made them comfortable. I didn't open it this time. I muted the conversation, flipped the phone over, and let it disappear from the room. Then I went back to the only place where any of this actually mattered. Work. By the time the sun came up, I'd reviewed every document for the meeting. Financial projections, risk assessments, legal notes Caleb had flagged, every detail locked in, no distractions, no second guessing, just clarity. At 7:15 a.m., Megan texted me, "Team's ready. Conference room A is set." I replied with one word, "Good," because that's all there was left to say. Whatever happened next wasn't about family. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about standards, and I was done lowering mine for people who had never once raised theirs for me. The weekend came and went without me noticing, not because I was busy, though I was, but because I'd stopped measuring time the way I used to. There were no family updates I cared about, no messages I was waiting for, no version of that house I was trying to stay connected to. There was just the work. Saturday morning, I was in the office before anyone else, going over the Caldwell Pierce file again. Not the surface-level numbers, the deeper layers. Contract language, risk exposure, internal structure, the kind of details most people skim because they assume the deal is already decided. I didn't assume anything. Vanessa joined me around 9, coffee in hand, already halfway through a spreadsheet. If they sign, she said, tapping her pen lightly against the page. We're looking at a 30% bump by Q3, conservative estimate. When they sign, I corrected. She didn't argue, just nodded once and kept going. That was the difference between the people I worked with and the people I'd grown up with. Here, results mattered. Not perception, not presentation, not who you were supposed to be. By early afternoon, I was on a call with Caleb, walking through the final legal notes. Financials are clean, he said. Structure's solid. But I meant what I said about the culture flags. I leaned back in my chair. Define flags. A pattern, he replied. Nothing public, nothing that would kill the deal outright, but enough internal complaints to suggest certain managers think they're untouchable. I didn't say anything for a second. Then, documented? Yes, good, I said. I want everything on record before Monday. There was a pause on the other end. You expecting an issue? Caleb asked. I don't expect anything, I said. I prepare for it. That night, sometime after 8. My phone buzzed again. Family group chat, another photo. Same backyard, same people, different angle. Ryan at the center, arm around his fiancée, looking exactly the way he always had, like the world was arranged correctly. Like everything was where it belonged. I studied it for a moment. Not with anger, with distance. Then I locked the screen and set the phone aside. Sunday was quieter. I spent most of it refining the presentation, tightening the numbers, cutting anything that wasn't necessary. By evening, everything was in place. No loose ends, no variables I hadn't accounted for. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m., I stepped into the building, and everything shifted into motion. Megan was already at her desk, tablet in hand, running through the schedule like a checklist. Conference room A is ready, she said. Decks loaded, financial binders printed, legal summaries tabbed. Good, I said, shrugging off my coat. They arrived early, she added. All 5 of them. I paused for half a second. Who's leading? Lauren Whitmore, VP, that tracked. And the rest? I asked. She glanced at her tablet. Account manager, head of operations, junior analyst, a beat, then finance manager, Ryan Mercer. The name landed exactly where I expected it to. No surprise, no reaction, just confirmation. Megan looked up at me, reading my expression the way she always did. You want me to reschedule? She asked quietly. I thought about it. Not long. No, I said. We're not moving anything. She gave a small nod. No questions, because she understood something most people didn't. This wasn't a problem. This was alignment. I adjusted my jacket, straightened my cuffs, and started toward the conference room. Through the glass wall, I could see them already seated around the long table. Lauren reviewing notes. Focused. Composed. The operations lead setting up his laptop. The analyst sitting too straight, trying not to look nervous. And Ryan leaning back in his chair. Ankle crossed over his knee, relaxed, confident, completely at ease. Like he belonged there, like he always had. He hadn't seen me yet. I stopped just outside the door. For a moment, everything went still. Not dramatic, not heavy, just clear. Then, I nodded once to Megan. She opened the door, and I walked in. The moment Ryan saw me, his face shifted in real time. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. And then, like muscle memory, amusement. Ethan, he said, a short laugh slipping out like he couldn't help it. What are you doing here? Lauren looked up from her notes, pen hovering mid-sentence. You know him, know him. Ryan leaned back, glancing around the room like he'd just been handed a story to tell. This is my brother. He let that sit for a second, then added, the one I was telling you about. I could feel my team behind me. Vanessa, Noah, Jason, completely still, not confused, not yet. Waiting. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dropping just enough to make it feel personal. What is this? He said, smiling. You hear we had a meeting here and decided to try your luck. No one spoke. He kept going. Reception's down the hall, he added, nodding casually. Or are you just here to make a scene? Lauren's expression changed, not sharply, not outwardly, but I saw it. A fracture. Ryan, she said quietly. Stop. He didn't. He couldn't. Not yet. Relax, he said, waving her off. He does this sometimes. Shows up where he's not supposed to be. He looked back at me, that same practiced smirk settling in. Seriously. Ethan, this isn't. I walked past him. No hesitation, no reaction. Just movement. Around the table. To the head. My chair. I pulled it out slowly, the sound of wood against the floor cutting through the room, like a line being drawn, and sat down. The brass nameplate caught the light. Ethan Mercer, CEO. For a second, nothing happened. Then, everything did. Lauren's eyes dropped to the plate. then back up to me, then across the room to the company logo on the wall. You could almost see the connections forming in real time. Her posture changed, completely. Ryan didn't notice. Okay, he said, laughing once under his breath. Like this was still recoverable. Very funny. You trying to impress someone or Ryan? Lauren's voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was controlled, tight. Stop talking. He blinked, thrown off for the first time. What? She didn't look at him. Not yet. Her attention was still on me, then. Finally, she spoke again. She's not, Ryan started. Lauren cut him off. He's not staff. The room went still. Ryan frowned, the smile slipping just a fraction. What are you? Lauren turned to him fully now. This is Ethan Mercer, she said, each word deliberate. Founder of Ironcrest Logistics. Another beat. The person we're here to meet. Silence. Real silence. The kind that presses in on your ears. Ryan's expression didn't change all at once. It failed in pieces. The confidence first, then the certainty, then the structure underneath both of them. You're... What he said. I folded my hands on the table. I'm the one evaluating whether your firm is a good fit for us, I said evenly. No anger, no edge, just fact. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't... He started. Vanessa spoke before he could finish. Mr. Mercer, she said, calm, precise. I'd strongly recommend you stop talking. He did, immediately. For the next 70 minutes, I ran the meeting. Not harder than usual, not softer. Just exact. We went through their projections line by line. I asked about retention rates. Turnover. Internal escalation processes. I referenced the culture concerns Caleb had flagged and asked for documentation. Lauren answered everything. Clean, direct, prepared. She didn't look at Ryan once. She didn't need to. He sat at the far end of the table. Completely still. No notes, no comments, no interruptions, just smaller. Every minute that passed made it worse, not because I was targeting him, but because I wasn't. This wasn't personal. That was the part that hurt him. By the time we wrapped, the room felt different. Reset, I stood, extending my hand to Lauren. Thank you, I said. We'll review internally and follow up. She shook it, her grip steady. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Ryan didn't stand, didn't speak, didn't look at me. He walked out behind her. 3 steps back, like gravity had shifted and he hadn't caught up yet. And for the first time in his life, no one in the room noticed him leave. The door closed behind them. And for a moment, no one said anything. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everyone in that room understood exactly what had just happened. Vanessa was the first to move. She picked up her pen again like the meeting had never stopped. Well, she said lightly, that answers the culture question. Noah let out a slow breath. That was... something. I didn't respond. I was already flipping back to the documents. Let's finish the review, I said, and we did. Not rushed, not distracted. If anything, more focused. I went back through Caldwell Pierce's numbers with the same precision I would have used if Ryan had never opened his mouth. Revenue projections, client concentration risk, operational dependencies, internal reporting structures, every detail mattered. That was the point. This wasn't about what happened in the room. It was about what their company looked like when you stripped away the presentation. Lauren's performance stood out immediately. Strong operator, clear thinking, no hesitation under pressure. She had the kind of discipline you couldn't fake, but the deeper we went into the documentation, the more the pattern Caleb mentioned started to show. Turnover rates in specific departments, exit interviews with consistent language, internal complaints that had been acknowledged but not acted on, names attached. Ryan's name came up more than once. Not dramatic incidents, nothing that would trigger headlines, just a steady pattern of behavior that, over time, corrodes everything around it. Dismissive language, taking credit, undermining junior staff in meetings, the same tone, the same instinct, the same person I'd grown up with. I closed the folder. That's enough, I said. Vanessa looked up. Decision conditional approval, I said. Noah leaned forward slightly. Conditions. I didn't answer immediately. Because this part mattered. Not the outcome, the reasoning. We don't build partnerships on numbers alone, I said. We build them on people who can operate inside the same standards we do. Jason nodded once. Agreed. Vanessa tapped her pen against the table. So what's the line? I met her eyes. No one with a documented pattern of that behavior touches our account. Simple, clear, non-negotiable. No one argued. Because they didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about family. It was about alignment, and Ryan didn't meet the standard. I stood, gathering the documents. I'll draft the terms, I said. Send them over by end of day. As we walked out of the conference room, Megan was already waiting with the next set of updates, tablet in hand. Expression neutral. Everything goes smoothly, she asked. I took the folder from her without breaking stride. Productive, I said. That was the only word that fit. Because what happened in that room wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't closure. It was a correction. A line being drawn between what I used to tolerate and what I never would again. By the time I got back to my office, my phone had already started lighting up. Missed calls, messages, voicemails stacking on top of each other like something urgent had suddenly become visible. I didn't check them right away. I sat down, opened my laptop, and finished drafting the internal summary from the meeting while everything was still fresh. Key risks, strengths, recommended conditions, clean, structured, objective. Only after I sent it to Vanessa and legal did I flip my phone over. 6 missed calls from my father. 11 messages from my mother. 1 voicemail from Ryan. I stared at his name for a second longer than the others. Then, I played it. His voice didn't sound like it usually did. The confidence was gone. The smoothness replaced by something uneven, unsteady. Ethan. Look. I didn't know. Okay, he said quickly. You could have said something. You should have said something. That was a bad situation. And he exhaled sharply, like he was trying to catch up with himself. I'm sorry if that came off wrong, he added. I didn't mean it like that. I stopped the message, deleted it. Not because I was angry, because I'd heard enough. My phone buzzed again. My father, this time, I answered. Ethan, he said immediately. His voice warmer than I'd heard in years. Too warm. We've been trying to reach you. Your mother's worried. I didn't respond. He continued anyway. We had no idea things had progressed the way they have, he said carefully. You should have told us. We're proud of you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline through the glass. You called me a disappointment, I said. A pause. That's not what I meant. He replied quickly. I was concerned. There's a difference. You said you wouldn't introduce me to people who'd built something of themselves. Another pause. Longer this time. That was poor wording, he said. You know how I get. I didn't realize that I had something worth showing. I finished. That's not fair. No, it wasn't. It was accurate. We're having dinner tomorrow, he went on, shifting gears. Just family. To celebrate. Your mother's already making plans. Of course she was. The tone had changed. The priorities hadn't. Ryan feels terrible, my father added. He didn't understand the situation. I let that sit for a second. Then, he understood exactly what he was doing, I said. He just didn't think it would cost him anything. Silence. Then, softer, he's your brother. I nodded once, even though he couldn't see it. And I'm your son, I said. Another silence. Different this time. Uncomfortable. Unresolved. Ethan, my father said, his voice tightening slightly. Don't turn this into something it doesn't need to be. Families make mistakes. I looked down at the city below. Cars moving. People walking. Everything continuing like normal. Family, I said slowly, are the people who stay when the first version doesn't work. He didn't answer. Because there was nothing to say. You weren't there, I added. So you don't get to show up now and call it support. His breath caught sharp, controlled. You're overreacting. There it was. Familiar. Predictable. Finished. No, I said. I'm done adjusting. I ended the call before he could respond. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. My mother this time. Then Ryan. Then both of them again. I turned it off. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. For the first time. There was no hesitation. No second guessing. Just silence. The kind you choose. The kind that finally belongs to you. Tuesday morning, I met Caleb at his office downtown. Corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of space that made people speak more carefully than they normally would. He had a file already laid out on the table when I walked in. Tabs marked. Notes clipped. Everything exactly where it needed to be. I pulled the full internal record on Caldwell Pierce, he said, sliding the folder toward me. Everything they disclosed. Plus what our team verified independently. I sat down and opened it. Financials are solid, he continued. No red flags there. Structure holds. Lauren Whitmore is exactly what she presented. Competent. Disciplined. Reliable. I nodded once. Scanning the pages. And I asked. Caleb tapped his pen lightly against one section. Ryan Mercer, of course. 3 formal complaints in the last 18 months. He said. All from junior staff. Consistent pattern condescending behavior. Taking credit. Creating a hostile environment in meetings. I kept reading. 2 of those employees left within 6 months. He added. HR documented it. No meaningful action taken. Protected, I asked. Functionally, Caleb said. High-performing accounts tend to buy tolerance. I leaned back slightly, closing the file halfway. So he treats everyone the way he treated me, I said. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. I flipped to the next section. Internal review signatures. Lauren's name appeared once, not approving the behavior, acknowledging it. Not enough to stop it, enough to know. I closed the folder. Draft 2 versions of the approval, I said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. 2, 1 with him on the account, I said. 1 without. He studied me for a second. You already know which one you're sending. I do, I said. But I want it documented that this was a business decision, not a reaction. A small pause. Then, it can be both, Caleb said. I almost smiled. Not on paper. He nodded once. Understood. By the time I got back to the office, the decision was already finished in my head. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't emotional. It was structural. People like Ryan don't change because of one moment. They change when the system stops rewarding them. I sat down, opened a new email, and addressed it to Lauren Whitmore and Caldwell Pierce's senior leadership. No hesitation. No edits after the first draft, just clarity. Subject, partnership approval, conditions. I kept it direct, professional, precise. Ironcrest Logistics was prepared to move forward with the partnership. Subject to one condition. Ryan Mercer would be removed from all Ironcrest-related accounts, effective immediately. I outlined the reasoning in neutral terms. Observed conduct during the initial meeting. Documented internal complaints, misalignment with operational standards and company culture. No accusations, no emotion. Just facts. Final line, this condition is non-negotiable. I read it once, then sent it. 2 hours later. Lauren replied. Short, efficient, understood. We'll make the reassignment by end of week. Thank you for your continued confidence. No defense, no argument, no attempt to negotiate. That told me everything I needed to know. About her, about their firm, about him. I closed the email thread and leaned back in my chair. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, just resolution. A decision made, a standard enforced, and for the first time in a long time, a consequence that actually stuck. I didn't respond to any of them that day. Not my father, not my mother, not Ryan. By Wednesday morning, the messages had slowed, not stopped, just changed in tone, less urgency, more calculation, like they were trying to figure out the right version of me to speak to now. The successful one, the acceptable one, the one they could finally claim. I wasn't interested in meeting him. I sat at my desk, opened a blank email, and stared at it for a moment longer than I needed to. Then, I started typing. No emotion, no build-up, just truth. Subject, moving forward. I've been thinking about everything that's happened over the past few days. You don't get to decide I'm a failure when I'm building something, and then decide I'm your son again when it turns into success. That's not how this works. Family isn't about showing up for the finished version. It's about being there when things are uncertain, when they're messy, when there's nothing to be proud of yet. You weren't there, not once. So you don't get to be here now. I've spent years trying to earn something from you that you had already decided not to give. I'm not doing that anymore. Don't contact me again, Ethan. I read it once, no edits, no second thoughts. Then I hit send. Immediately after, I blocked both of their numbers, not out of anger. Out of finality. There was nothing left to discuss. No version of that conversation that ended differently. No explanation that would suddenly make them understand something they had chosen not to see for years. I closed my laptop and stepped out into the hallway. Megan was there, coffee in hand, already moving through the afternoon schedule. She paused when she saw me. You okay? She asked. Not as an assistant. As someone who knew enough to ask the question properly. I took the coffee from her, feeling the warmth settle into my hands. Yeah, I said. And I meant it. Not relieved, not happy, just clear. Like a noise I'd been living with for years had finally stopped. Megan studied my face for a second, then gave a small nod. Good, she said, handing me the next file. You've got the 2 p.m. with the Philly expansion team. I glanced down at the schedule. Normal. Forward. Unaffected. Let's keep it that way, I said, because that was the difference now. Nothing behind me had any say in what came next, and for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 3 months later, the numbers spoke for themselves. The Caldwell-Pierce partnership closed clean and scaled faster than projected. By the end of the quarter, it had brought in just over $4.6 million in new revenue, opening doors in markets we hadn't even planned to enter that early. Execution was sharp, alignment held, and the people who mattered proved it. Lauren Whitmore was promoted to senior vice president within 8 weeks of the deal going live. The announcement came through in a formal press release. But she followed it up with something else, a handwritten note sent directly to my office, real paper, real ink. Thank you for evaluating me based on my work, not my associations. I read it once, then filed it in my desk. Because that's how respect works. It shows up in quiet ways, not loud ones. Ryan's trajectory went the other direction. No public fallout, no dramatic exit, just a quiet reassignment. Internal operations, no client-facing responsibilities, no visibility. In his world, that was worse than being fired. He wasn't removed, he was erased. I didn't follow up, I didn't ask, I didn't need to. As for my parents, they tried, not directly. Through extended family, cousins, old contacts, people who thought they were helping. Your mom's really struggling, one of them told me over the phone. She says she didn't know. She didn't want to know, I replied. There was a pause. Because that's the part people don't argue with. They just sit in it, and then they move on. So did I. The second office opened in Philadelphia 6 weeks after that. Unanimous board approval. Vanessa tapped her pen against her teeth the entire meeting, her tell, when everything lined up exactly the way it should. Noah got emotional again. Jason brought champagne like he always did when something mattered. We celebrated, briefly. Then we got back to work. Later that evening, I stood alone in my office, looking out over the city. The lights had come on. Traffic moving. Everything in motion. My phone sat on the desk behind me. Silent. No missed calls. No messages waiting. No noise. 3 months earlier, that silence would have meant something else. Now it meant everything. I thought about that version of me sitting in my old bedroom, staring at a future that didn't seem to exist yet, trying to understand why nothing he did ever felt like it was enough. I wouldn't tell him it gets better. That's too simple. And I wouldn't tell him they regret it. That's too small. I'd tell him this. You don't need them to see you. You just need to keep building until you see yourself. I grabbed my coat, turned off the lights, and walked out, not toward anything I'd lost, but into everything I'd built from the version of me they had already written off. Turns out they were right about one thing. I did embarrass someone, just not the person they expected. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more real, intense Reddit-style dramas. This story was created by the Fish Tells Stories team for entertainment purposes only. Do not imitate any actions in real life.